Number 1. Baalbek, the Forgotten Stone. In 2014, a team working in a limestone quarry in eastern Lebanon uncovered the single heaviest worked stone ever found on Earth. It weighs approximately 1,500 metric tons. That is roughly the weight of 3 fully loaded Boeing 747 aircraft sitting on a single carved block. The stone had been cut, shaped, and then abandoned, left in the ground as if the builders simply walked away. This quarry sits less than a kilometer from the Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek, one of the most studied Roman ruins in the world. But the monolith in the quarry has nothing to do with Rome. To understand why, you need to look at what the Romans actually built on top of. The platform beneath the Temple of Jupiter includes a row of 3 horizontal limestone blocks known as the Trilithon. Each one measures roughly 19 meters long, 4.2 meters high, and 3.6 meters thick. Each weighs between 750 and 800 metric tons. They sit side by side, fitted with such precision that a sheet of paper cannot be inserted into the joints between them. Below the Trilithon rests a sublayer of blocks weighing roughly 350 tons apiece. These are the small stones. They dwarf anything Rome ever moved. The ceiling of Roman engineering, based on everything we know about their cranes, pulleys, and workforce logistics, was approximately 320 tons. That is the heaviest single load any Roman system is documented as handling. No Roman text, inscription, or historical record claims credit for placing the Trilithon. The erosion on the Megalithic foundation shows significantly more weathering than the Roman temple sitting directly on top of it. The foundation is visibly older. Now consider the quarry. The Stone of the Pregnant Woman, a name given by local tradition, still sits partially extracted at approximately 1,000 tons. Its weight was confirmed by geodetic survey teams in 1996. Nearby, the Stone of the South, rediscovered in the 1990s, weighs an estimated 1,242 tons. And then, the 2014 stone, heavier still. All 3 were cut from the same limestone bed, and all 3 were left behind. The transport problem is severe. Moving any of these stones from the quarry to the temple platform required crossing nearly 1 kilometer of uneven uphill terrain. The high-density limestone was specifically chosen for durability, which also means it is extraordinarily heavy per cubic meter. Some researchers who have examined the block surfaces describe them as expertly machined, rather than hand-carved, a distinction that implies rotary or abrasive tooling rather than simple chisel work. Mainstream archaeology attributes the original platform to Phoenician builders working roughly 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, with Romans later constructing their temple on top. The problem is straightforward. No known Phoenician technology could lift, transport, or place an 800-ton monolith. The foundation theory, now the working model for many historians, holds that Rome built its temple atop a pre-existing megalithic platform it did not construct and could not replicate. No documentation from the 1st century AD explains the platform's origin. Lebanese folklore takes a different route entirely. Local tradition attributes the site to giants who stacked the stones like building blocks. The fringe hypothesis, drawing from researchers outside mainstream archaeology, proposes an unknown pre-Phoenician civilization with lifting and transport capabilities that have no surviving parallel. And here's the detail that anchors all of it in the present. No single crane currently operational anywhere on Earth could lift the forgotten stone in one piece. Baalbek functions as a case study in what some scholars call inherited architecture, later civilizations building on foundations they did not understand. If Baalbek represents the upper limit of megalithic mass, the next site represents something arguably more difficult to explain, the upper limit of megalithic precision. Number 2. Sacsayhuamán, the earthquake-proof fortress. Overlooking the city of Cusco in the Peruvian highlands sits a structure that has survived every major earthquake to hit the region for centuries. Sacsayhuamán is classified as both a fortress and a ceremonial complex. Its walls are built from individual limestone boulders weighing between 100 and 200 metric tons each. But the weight is not the remarkable part. The remarkable part is the geometry. The defining feature of Sacsayhuamán is its polygonal masonry. Each stone is cut with curved interfaces and multi-angled joints. Some individual blocks have up to 12 distinct angles, each one fitting flush against its neighbors. no mortar was used. The joints are so tight that a single human hair cannot pass between them. This has been tested and confirmed by multiple engineering teams over the past century, but there is a critical detail that reframes the entire construction. The hair-thin precision of the joints extends only a few centimeters inward from the outer face. Behind that polished contact surface, the interior is filled with rubble. This is not sloppy workmanship, it is the opposite. The builders understood that only the contact surface needed to be precision cut to maintain structural integrity. The interior fill added mass and damping without requiring the same tolerances. This is a procedural distinction, knowing where precision matters and where it does not. That reflects an advanced understanding of load distribution. The seismic performance proves the point. Sacsayhuamán's dry stone interlocking design allows the walls to resettle during earthquakes rather than collapse. The high static friction between precisely shaped contact areas maintains stability without any adhesive. Modern seismic engineers recognize this as a legitimate anti-seismic strategy. The walls are arranged in 3 massive tiers with zigzag patterns, likely serving both defensive and ritualistic functions. The logistics mystery compounds the engineering one. These 200-ton stones were transported across Andean terrain without the wheel or draft animals. The limestone was sourced from nearby quarries, but the method of moving such weight uphill and into position remains actively debated. Engineers who study the site note a complete absence of experimentation or learning curves in the masonry. There are no failed attempts, no practice walls, no discarded half-cut stones nearby. The builders appear to have arrived at the technique fully formed. Mainstream archaeology dates Sacsayhuamán to the 15th century, attributing it to the Inca Empire under the ruler Pachacuti. Alternative researchers argue the Inca inherited and built upon much older megalithic foundations, pointing to the stylistic differences between the massive polygonal base layers and the smaller, rougher Inca stonework above. Quechua folklore attributes the original construction to giants or mystical beings with the power to soften stone, a legend that echoes across multiple continents. Recent investigations have identified a hydraulic network flowing through the stone structures, described by some researchers as impossible given the attributed construction period. The layout of the walls also creates unique acoustic resonances during ceremonies, suggesting the builder's design for sound as well as structure. Modern replication attempts using period-appropriate tools and methods have consistently failed to achieve the same tolerances. Sacsayhuamán is not a ruin. It is a living cultural landmark, still central to the annual Inti Raymi, the Festival of the Sun. And the rubble fill revelation tells us something essential about the people who built it. They were pragmatic engineers. Precision was applied only where it mattered structurally. That kind of decision-making does not emerge from mysticism. It emerges from deep technical experience. The question is where that experience came from, because the next site, just 60 kilometers away, may preserve a partial answer, frozen in mid-construction. Number 3, Ollantaytambo, the unfinished puzzle. 60 kilometers northwest of Cusco, the Sacred Valley narrows at a strategic point where a fortress and ceremonial center were carved into the mountainside. Ollantaytambo is significant for many reasons, but its greatest value to researchers is its state of incompletion. The Sun Temple at the summit appears to have been abandoned mid-construction. Large blocks remain on ramps. Transport infrastructure is still visible on the slopes. This is one of the very few places in the ancient world where the building process itself is partially frozen in time. The centerpiece is the wall of the 6 monoliths, 6 tall vertical slabs of rare rose rhyolite, each weighing approximately 50 tons. The quarry that produced these blocks is at Cachicota, 7 kilometers away across the Urubamba River and through deep valleys. The transport route required moving each 50-ton stone down steep slopes across a river and then uphill to the construction site. Physical evidence of the transport infrastructure survives, an elaborate network of roads, ramps, and stone slides cut into the terrain. The monoliths are fitted together with thin stone spacers placed between them to absorb seismic stress. This joint spacer technique is an anti-seismic engineering concept that is still used in modern construction. Bridge bearings and expansion joints operate on the same principle. The builders understood that rigid connections fail under lateral force, while flexible joints distribute it. A flawless hydraulic network channels rainwater through the stone structures, making them feel alive during storms. Water moves through carved channels with deliberate routing. Astronomical alignments with solar events, including the winter solstice, are built into the orientation of the walls. Nearby storehouses, called kulkas, use high-altitude ventilation systems to prevent food decay, demonstrating practical engineering alongside the monumental work. The site exhibits two clearly distinct construction styles. There is rough fieldstone masonry and there is elite imperial megalithic masonry. Two different skill levels are visible on the same site. Carved symbols on nearby stones feature abstract geometric shapes, spirals, and stylized figures. No evidence of bronze or stone tools capable of machining granite to the documented tolerances has been found at the site. Modern attempts to replicate the stone transport using ancient methods have failed at this scale. Mainstream attribution places the construction during the reign of Pachacuti in the 15th century. But the megalithic foundations suggest earlier occupation. The Viracocha legend, central to Andean oral tradition, describes a wise civilization that taught advanced skills to local peoples before vanishing. The town below, Ollantaytambo, still uses the original Inca-designed street grid and water channels. That is functional urban infrastructure operating continuously for over 500 years. Ollantaytambo's real value is that unfinished state. Unlike completed sites where the construction method has been erased by the finished product, the blocks on the ramps and the visible transport routes offer a rare window into process. But even that window raises more questions than it answers, because the next site on this list did not just challenge a timeline, it shattered one. Number 4. Göbekli Tepe, the temple before agriculture. In southeastern Turkey, on a barren hilltop overlooking the Harran Plain, sits the structure that rewrote the opening chapter of human civilization. Göbekli Tepe has been dated to 9,600 through 8,200 BC. It is nearly 12,000 years old. It predates Stonehenge by roughly 6,000 years. It predates the invention of pottery, the domestication of animals, and, critically, the development of agriculture. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars reach 5.5 to 6 meters in height and weigh between 10 and 20 metric tons each. They were carved and transported from an adjacent limestone plateau without metal tools. The only cutting implements available were flint and obsidian. The social paradox is immediate. This was built by hunter-gatherers. For over a century, the foundational assumption of archaeology was that agriculture must precede monumental architecture. Settled farming creates surplus. Surplus creates labor. Specialization. Specialization creates builders. Göbekli Tepe inverted that entire sequence. 20 years of excavation have found no evidence of permanent habitation, no cooking fires, no domestic tools, no long-term dwellings. The site is interpreted as a ceremonial center, a gathering place, not a settlement. Some researchers call it the world's first temple. High-relief artistic carvings depict foxes, vultures, snakes, lions, and spiders with remarkable naturalistic detail. These are not crude scratches. They are skilled representations requiring trained hands and significant time investment. Pillar 43 features a figure carrying what appears to be a handbag or pouch. This motif, a figure holding a container with a curved handle, appears in Mesopotamian art, Mesoamerican carvings, and other cultures, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. The T-shaped pillars themselves are abstract human forms, carved with belts and loincloths, suggesting anthropomorphic symbolism. Serpent imagery is dominant throughout the site, paralleling iconography at Serpent Mound in North America and temple complexes across Southeast Asia. The enclosures align with specific star constellations and seasonal astronomical events. Pre-agricultural people were tracking the sky with enough precision to encode those observations into stone architecture. The construction required hierarchical social structure and specialized craftsmen, capabilities that were, until this discovery, considered unprecedented for Neolithic societies. Then there is the burial. Around 8000 BC, the entire site was deliberately buried under tons of earth and rubble, not destroyed, buried. This intentional act preserved the carvings from weather erosion for nearly 10,000 years. Sister sites, Karhantepe and Navali Chori, share identical architectural and symbolic traits, suggesting not a single anomalous construction, but a regional culture with shared practices. Mainstream theory frames Göbekli Tepe as a ritual center built by increasingly complex hunter-gatherer societies, at the dawn of the Neolithic transition. The fringe interpretation sees it as the work of a now vanished advanced civilization. Local traditions speak of old ones who taught agriculture and then disappeared. What is not debatable is the result. Göbekli Tepe did not just push back the timeline. It inverted the assumed relationship between settlement and monumentality. And if that inversion applies here, the next site raises the possibility that Egypt's own foundations are older than Egypt itself. Number 5. The Osireion, Egypt's hidden basement. Behind the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, buried significantly below ground level, sits a structure that does not match anything else in Egyptian architecture. The Osireion is built from massive granite pillars and lintels weighing between 100 and 200 tons. Its architectural style has been described as minimalist sophistication, no ornate inscriptions, no painted reliefs, nothing resembling the elaborate decoration found in every other Egyptian temple of the dynastic period. It is starkly, conspicuously different. Mainstream dating attributes the Osireion to Seti I, placing it around 1290 BC. But geologists have identified vertical rain erosion marks on the blocks. These erosion patterns are consistent with prolonged exposure to heavy sustained rainfall. Egypt's climate shifted from wet to arid approximately 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. If the erosion is genuine, and multiple geological assessments say it is, the structure was exposed to weather conditions that ceased to exist thousands of years before Seti was born. The subterranean layout features a central island surrounded by a water-filled moat. This configuration symbolizes the primeval mound of Egyptian creation mythology, the first land to emerge from the waters of chaos. The megalithic joints are fitted without mortar so precisely that a sheet of paper cannot fit between them. This is the identical technique documented at Sacsayhuamán, on the opposite side of the planet. The Greek geographer Strabo visited the site in the 1st century BC and described it as a remarkable structure built of solid stone. Early 20th century excavators Flinders Petrie and Margaret Murray excavated the structure between 1902 and 1903. The chambers remain constantly filled with groundwater, which has hindered full excavation to this day. A 69-meter stone-lined entrance tunnel runs along a precise north-south axis. Cartouches bearing Seti's name are present on the walls, but critics argue these were added to an already existing structure, the ancient equivalent of signing someone else's work. The technological comparison is telling. The engineering of the Osireion far exceeds that of the adjacent Temple of Seti built centuries later. The granite chamber produces distinct acoustic resonance, potentially designed for ritual chanting. The Osireion shares construction traits with the Valley Temple at Giza and with Sacsayhuamán. Massive, undecorated, precision-fitted granite blocks. The ancient Egyptians themselves may have acknowledged this discrepancy. Inscriptions reference the Shemsu-Hor, the followers of Horus, a pre-dynastic culture said to have built the sacred structures that later pharaohs merely maintained. The Osireion was called the hidden secret place of the underworld, the mythological duet. Whether that label is religious metaphor or historical memory is the question that splits researchers. Did dynastic Egypt build upon foundations left by a culture they themselves considered ancient? The architectural evidence suggests they did. And the next site suggests that this pattern of anonymous, precision-engineered megalithic construction was not limited to the Mediterranean or the Americas. It extended deep into the Pacific. Number 6. Ishi-no-Hōden, the floating megalith. Within the grounds of the Oshiko-jinja Shinto shrine in Takasego, Japan, sits a 500-ton monolith that appears to float on water. It does not, of course. A small central pillar supports the base, concealed by a surrounding water-filled depression that creates the visual illusion. But the illusion is the least interesting thing about this structure. The stone measures 6.4 meters long, 5.7 meters wide, and 5.45 meters high. It was carved from rhyolite welded tuff, a volcanic rock known locally as Tatsuyama stone, formed by volcanic activity approximately 100 million years ago. The shape consists of two flat rectangular parallel pipes with a pyramid-shaped protrusion on one side. It was carved directly in situ from the living bedrock, surrounded on three sides by unprocessed rock with a gap just wide enough for an adult to pass through. Modern stonemasons who have examined the surfaces describe them as astonishingly smooth, with precise, clean-cut angles. There is a complete absence of tool marks typical of primitive chiseling. How the surfaces were finished to this standard remains unknown. No carving debris exists at the site, no stone chips, no waste material, no evidence of the extraction process. The first historical reference appears in the Harima Kokuda Fudoki, compiled between 713 and 717 AD, which attributes it to Mononobe no Moriya. Shinto legend offers a different origin. The kami Okuninushi and Sukunabikona attempted to build a stone palace overnight. The German physician and naturalist Philipp Franz von Siebold made detailed sketches of the monument in 1832, published in his work Nippian. The structure was named a National Historic Site of Japan in 1979. The permanent pond at the base is integral to both the floating illusion and Shinto ritual practice, demonstrating hydrological integration into the design. Modern engineers acknowledge that moving or replicating such a block would require advanced 21st century logistics. Despite its scale and precision, the structure is rarely mentioned in mainstream global history, a case of what might be called cultural anonymity. Mainstream theory classifies it as a tomb or religious monument carved with iron tools during the Kofun or Asuka period. Alternative researchers point to the precision and the absence of tool marks as evidence of techniques beyond the known capabilities of that era. The fringe interpretation connects it to a broader Pacific megalithic tradition linked to other anomalous stonework across Asia and Polynesia. Its companion site, just a few dozen kilometers away, presents an even heavier puzzle. Number 7. Masuda-no-Iwafune, the rock ship. In the Asuka region of Japan, atop a hill with commanding views of the surrounding countryside, sits a granite monolith estimated at 800 to 882 metric tons. It is called Masuda-no-Iwafune, the rock ship of Masuda. It measures approximately 11 meters long, 8 meters wide, and 4.7 meters high. The surface is polished to a high degree of smoothness that specialists describe as showcasing the highest level of ancient processing technology. 2 perfectly square holes, each approximately 1 meter across, are carved into the flattened top surface. Their purpose is unknown. A ridge line runs parallel to the square holes across the top of the monolith. Lattice-shaped indentations at the base may relate to a leveling process, or they may be anchor points for a larger superstructure that no longer exists. The debris question resurfaces here. No carving debris exists in the vicinity. This mirrors the pattern at Ishi-no-Hōden and at multiple megalithic sites worldwide. Either meticulous cleanup was performed, removing thousands of tons of granite chips from a hilltop, or the stone was carved elsewhere and transported uphill. Both explanations present severe logistical problems. Unlike other structures in the Asuka region, Masuda-no-Iwafune lacks evidence of being a tomb, a temple, or an observatory. Local guides suggest it served as a facility for astrological forecasting. Some scholars believe it was an unfinished monument abandoned for unknown reasons. The stone is made of high-grade granite requiring specialized tools for intricate carving. No such tools have been found at the site or in the surrounding area. The structure is conventionally associated with the Kofun period, roughly 250 to 552 AD, though its design is unique within that era. Local legends speak of advanced beings who arrived across the sea and vanished after a catastrophic flood. Some researchers have compared its abstract carvings to motifs found at Göbekli Tepe and other distant sites. Masuda-no-Iwafune's function remains one of Japan's genuine archaeological mysteries. No consensus exists, but the pattern it shares with other sites, precision finishing, absent debris, unknown tools, flood legends, is becoming harder to dismiss as coincidence. The next site takes us underwater entirely. Number 8, the Arwad Submerged Wall, the Drowned Foundation. Off the coast of Arwad Island, Syria, one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements in the world, massive limestone blocks rest several meters beneath the surface of the Mediterranean. They were not built underwater. They were built on dry land. The sea came later. The wall is constructed from large limestone blocks comparable in scale to those found at the South American megalithic sites. The stones are fitted tightly without mortar, exhibiting advanced geometry consistent with the joinery techniques documented across this entire investigation. The underwater position is direct physical evidence of a significant post-construction rise in sea level. Survey data from submerged structures across the Levant region places these constructions as far back as 9,250 through 6,600 BC. A similar submerged wall, 120 meters long, was discovered off the coast of Brittany, France, dating to approximately 5800 BC. Mainstream history records no Phoenician technology capable of building large-scale underwater foundations. That is because they were not underwater when they were built. For the Arwad wall to have been constructed on dry ground, the builders must have been working during a period when sea levels were significantly lower, a period that predates the accepted timeline for this level of construction by thousands of years. Surrounding structures date to the pre-pottery Neolithic sea period. Coastal aquifer wells built from undressed stone confirm practical engineering in the region at these dates. Marine sediment has protected the stones from erosion, leaving them exceptionally well preserved. The stylistic similarity to South American walls has led some researchers to describe a shared cultural vocabulary, though mainstream archaeology attributes this to convergent solutions for similar engineering problems. Local flood narratives describe prosperous civilizations that vanished after catastrophic inundations. Much of the wall remains unexcavated due to modern political instability and water depth. Purpose theories range from a retaining wall to a fishing trap designed for tidal movements to harbor infrastructure. Arwad forces a simple question. If the wall was built on dry land, when was the land dry? And the next site, visible only from the air, raises equally uncomfortable questions about what ancient builders could see that we assume they could not. Number 9. Rujm el-Hiri, the Wheel of Giants. In the Golan Heights, on a barren, windswept plateau dominating the terrain for miles, sits a structure made from over 42,000 tons of loose basalt volcanic rock arranged in 5 concentric circles with a central burial mound. The largest outer circle measures 160 meters in diameter. It is known as Rujm el-Hiri, the stone heap of the wild cat, or more popularly, the Wheel of Giants. Conventional dating places the structure between 3000 and 3500 BC in the early Bronze Age. The summer solstice alignment is its most cited feature. The first rays of the rising sun shine directly through the entrance to illuminate the central mound. But a 2026 geodynamic study introduced a complication. 150 million years of tectonic shifts have rotated the site at a rate of 8 to 15 millimeters per year. This means the solstice alignment we observe today may not reflect the original astronomical intent of the builders. The structure may have been calibrated to a different celestial target entirely. The complexity of the rippled wall layout is only fully visible from the air. At ground level, a person walking through the site would see a field of basalt stones. The concentric geometry, its most distinctive feature, is invisible without elevation. This raises an obvious question about the design process. Either the builders worked from a plan they could visualize abstractly, or they had access to an elevated vantage point. No natural elevation nearby provides the necessary perspective. The central tumulus contains a burial chamber, though it dates to a later period than the surrounding walls, another case of later cultures adding to an existing structure. Coordination of large groups was necessary to place thousands of basalt stones, implying organized labor and established leadership. Local Druze folklore attributes the site to an ancient race of giants who moved stones by hand. The concentric rings may have served acoustic or ceremonial functions for communal gatherings. Advanced satellite technology has identified dozens of similar tumuli and agricultural enclosures within 30 kilometers. Solstice alignment required multi-generational tracking of celestial bodies, astronomical knowledge spanning centuries of continuous observation. No written records from the original builders exist. The culture vanished without a textual trace. Despite the absence of mortar, the basalt rings have remained largely intact for approximately 5,000 years. What links this structure to the broader pattern is not mass or precision, it is knowledge. Astronomical calibration, landscape scale planning, and multi-generational coordination. These are not the hallmarks of a simple pastoral society, and the next entry on this list is not a structure at all. It is a single cut. Number 10. Al-Naslaa Rock, the clean cut. In the Tema oasis of northwestern Saudi Arabia, 2 massive sandstone boulders stand approximately 6 meters high, separated by a remarkably straight, perfectly smooth vertical split. Each half is balanced on a small, naturally formed pedestal, a mushroom rock shape created by differential erosion. The fracture line stretches several meters and is consistently described as laser straight. The surface is adorned with petroglyphs, thousands of years old, depicting horses, ibexes, and human figures. 3 geological theories compete to explain the split. The first proposes fault line activity or seismic shifts that caused a clean break at a natural weak point in the stone. The second invokes freeze-thaw, weathering, water seeping into a small crack and expanding as ice over repeated cycles, forcing a straight split over centuries. The third points to naturally occurring joints, planes of weakness within the sandstone that enabled rain and wind to gradually cleave the boulder along a pre-existing line. A second parallel joint on the backside provides evidence that natural jointing was involved. The human intervention theory proposes that an ancient civilization used unknown tools to shear the rock as a religious or artistic marker. The key anomaly supporting this view is the smoothness of the internal split, which contrasts sharply with the eroded, pitted exterior surfaces. Small horizontal cracks on both sides of the split do not align, suggesting they formed after the primary fracture event. No debris from a manual cut exists, consistent with the debris absence pattern noted at multiple other megalithic sites. Arabian legends tell of tribes who could soften stone or shape rock with mythical tools. Bedouin tradition speaks of skilled craftsmen who left marks as symbolic reminders of their passing. Even with modern diamond wire saw technology, achieving such a precise cut in stone of this size would be labor-intensive and technically demanding. The pedestals beneath the boulders are eroding faster than the upper sections. The structure is geologically temporary. It will not last forever. Al-Naslaa is frequently cited by alternative historians as evidence of lost high technology. Whether natural or artificial, it demonstrates that stone behaves in ways that challenge casual assumptions about what requires human intervention and what does not. The split is a Rorschach test. What you see in it reveals your assumptions about ancient capabilities. But what happens when you stop looking at individual sites and start looking at the pattern they form together? Cross-site pattern. Analysis: the recurring signatures. Mortar-free precision joinery appears at Sacsayhuamán, the Osireion, Baalbek, and Arwad. These sites are separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. The paper-thin joint standard is independently described at a minimum of 4 sites across 3 continents. Complete absence of construction debris is documented at Ishi-no-Hōden, Masuda-no-Iwafune, Al-Naslaa, and multiple Peruvian sites. Flood narratives accompany sites in Peru, Syria, Japan, and Turkey. Softened stone legends appear in Quechua tradition, Arabian folklore, and Shinto mythology. Polygonal masonry with multi-angled interlocking joints appears in both Peru and Lebanon. Rain erosion evidence at the Osireion and weathering differentials at Baalbek both suggest structures older than their attributed civilizations. Astronomical alignment is documented at Göbekli Tepe, Ollantaytambo, and Rujm el-Hiri. Acoustic properties are noted at Sacsayhuamán, the Osireion, and Rujm el-Hiri. Hydraulic integration appears at Ollantaytambo, Sacsayhuamán, and the Osireion's water-filled moat. The handbag motif at Göbekli Tepe appears in Mesopotamian, Mesoamerican, and Olmec iconography. Serpent imagery recurs at Göbekli Tepe, Serpent Mound in North America, and Southeast Asian temple complexes. The inherited structure pattern, later civilizations claiming or modifying older foundations, appears at Baalbek, the Osireion, and Sacsayhuamán. Each site's folklore includes a vanished teacher civilization, Viracocha, Shemsu-Hor, the old ones of Göbekli Tepe. Mainstream explanation: independent invention. Similar problems produce similar solutions. This is a well-established principle in evolutionary biology and engineering alike. Archaeological theory offers a second framework. Trade networks and cultural diffusion spread techniques over millennia. The fringe interpretation proposes a shared ancestral civilization predating known history that distributed this knowledge globally before a catastrophic event erased it. No single theory accounts for all patterns simultaneously. Each explains some evidence while leaving other evidence unaddressed. Pattern recognition is not proof, but ignoring patterns is not science either. The recurring signatures do not prove a single origin. They demand a more sophisticated model than pure coincidence. And the climate record provides a timeline for when that model may have collapsed. The sea level timeline. When the land was dry. At the last glacial maximum, approximately 20,000 years ago, global sea levels were roughly 120 meters lower than they are today. Between 14,000 and 7,000 years ago, rapid ice sheet melting raised sea levels dramatically during events known as meltwater pulses. The Arwad structures date to 9,250 through 6,600 BC based on survey data. They were built on dry land. The Brittany Wall dates to approximately 5,800 BC, also built above the waterline of its era. For the Arwad walls to have been constructed on dry ground, the builders predate the accepted emergence of complex masonry by millennia. The pre-pottery Neolithic sea period surrounding structures confirm human activity in the region at these dates. Flood narratives from Mesopotamia, the Levant, South Asia, and the Americas all cluster around the 9,000 to 7,000 BC window. Göbekli Tepe's deliberate burial around 8,000 BC falls within the same catastrophic window. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, advanced by researchers including James Kennett and Richard Firestone, proposes a cosmic event around 10,800 BC that triggered rapid cooling and subsequent flooding. Mainstream geology accepts the sea level rise data but disputes that complex civilizations existed during this period. Yet archaeological evidence from Jericho, Çatalhöyük, and other Neolithic sites confirms organized communities in precisely this era. The gap between organized communities and 500-ton megalithic construction remains the central debate. If the Osireion's rain erosion dates to roughly 10,000 BC, it falls within this same wet, pre-arid climate window. Multiple sites show weathering patterns consistent with a wetter, earlier epoch than their conventional dating allows. The pre-flood framing is not mythological. It corresponds to a documented geological event. What was lost is not just structures, but the coastal, lowland civilizations that would have been first to flood. Modern marine archaeology is only beginning to survey these submerged zones systematically. The sea took the evidence, and we are only now developing the technology to look for it. But even where the structures survive above water, a different kind of evidence is missing. The technological paradox, tools that do not exist. At Göbekli Tepe, T-shaped pillars were carved and transported from limestone using only flint and obsidian. At Masuda-no-Iwafune, high-grade granite was polished to smoothness, requiring tools that have never been found at the site. At Ishi-no-Hōden, surfaces are astonishingly smooth and rhyolite welded tough with no tool marks, and the finishing method is unknown. At Ollantaytambo, no evidence of bronze or stone tools capable of machining rose rhyolite to the documented tolerances has been recovered. At Baalbek, some surfaces are described as expertly machined rather than hand-carved. At Sacsayhuamán, the multi-angle precision cutting of limestone with up to 12 faces per stone implies template-based or guided cutting technology. At the Osireion, granite pillars and lintels of 100 to 200 tons are fitted to paper-thin tolerances, matching or exceeding dynastic Egyptian capability. The mainstream explanation is time, patience, and incremental techniques. Pounding stones with harder stones. Sand abrasion. Copper tools with quartz grit embedded in the cutting edge. These methods have been tested experimentally. They produce results. But they produce results at scales far smaller than the monuments in question. The scaling problem is fundamental. Techniques that work on a 1-ton block do not necessarily work on a 500-ton block. The physics of friction, leverage, and material stress change with mass. No ancient quarry site has yielded a complete toolkit that explains the full production chain from extraction to finished surface. The debris absence compounds the tooling mystery. Tools leave waste. The waste is missing. Some researchers propose lost organic tools, hardwood implements, bone tools, sinew-driven mechanisms that decayed without trace over thousands of years. Others propose acoustic or vibrational techniques, speculative but rooted in documented physical properties of certain frequencies on crystalline stone. The appropriate technology argument offers a middle path. Ancient builders may have used methods perfectly suited to their specific materials that we simply have not rediscovered. Modern stonemasons who visit these sites consistently express surprise at the finished quality. The tooling gap does not require invoking extraterrestrials or supernatural forces. It requires admitting that our reconstruction of ancient toolkits is incomplete. Each site's attributed builders had access to different raw materials: limestone, granite, rhyolite, basalt, sandstone. Yet the precision standard across all of them is remarkably consistent. The question is not whether they had advanced tools. The question is what techniques produce these results that we have not yet identified. What was lost and why? Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried by its own builders around 8000 BC, an intentional act of concealment or preservation. The Inca claimed the megalithic foundations at Sacsayhuamán and Ollantaytambo predated their civilization. The Egyptians attributed the Osireion and similar structures to the Shemsu-Hor, a pre-dynastic culture they considered divine. At Baalbek, the Romans built on a platform they did not construct and left no explanation of its origin. Rising sea levels between 14,000 and 7,000 years ago submerged thousands of kilometers of coastal lowlands. Coastal civilizations, the most likely to develop trade, engineering, and maritime technology, were the first destroyed. The Younger Dryas event around 10,800 BC may have triggered a civilization resetting catastrophe before the gradual flooding even began. Oral traditions degrade. The Viracocha, Shemsu-Hor, and old ones, stories survive as myth rather than history. Conquest erases records. Spanish colonizers destroyed Inca Quipu records and oral histories systematically. The absence of written records from pre-literate societies means construction knowledge was transmitted orally and manually, person to person, generation to generation. A single generation of disruption, famine, war, plague can sever an oral technical tradition permanently. The unfinished state of Ollantaytambo may record exactly such a disruption. Work stopped and never resumed. The Arwad wall sits unexcavated due to modern political instability. Knowledge loss continues in the present tense. Climate change, conquest, and the fragility of oral tradition form a triple mechanism of erasure. What we call lost knowledge may simply be knowledge that was never written down and whose practitioners died. The physical evidence survives because stone endures. But the context, the methods, and the meaning did not. Modern archaeology is recovering fragments through marine survey, satellite imaging, and interdisciplinary analysis. The deliberate burial at Göbekli Tepe suggests the builders foresaw a threat and chose preservation over use. Every vanished civilization legend may encode a real memory of knowledge disruption. Stone and physics. Every structure in this investigation obeys the same laws of physics we use today. Gravity, friction, leverage, and material properties have not changed in 12,000 years. What changed is our assumption about who understood these principles and when. The builders did not need supernatural assistance. They needed knowledge we have not yet recovered. Polygonal masonry, seismic dampening, hydraulic integration, these are engineering solutions, not mysteries. The mystery is not the physics, it is the timeline. Stone is the most durable recording medium on Earth. It outlasts paper, metal, and digital storage. These monuments are their own documentation. The proof of capability is the structure itself. Modern replication failures do not mean the task was impossible. They mean we have not found the method. Innovation does not require modern technology, it requires understanding fundamental laws of nature. Every era produces builders who push materials to their limits using whatever knowledge they possess. The question is not whether ancient people were capable. The evidence says they were. The question is whether our model of history is complete enough to explain what they left behind. These 10 sites, spanning 5 continents, suggest it is not. The stones remain patient, precise, and waiting for better questions.